Welcome to Oklahoma Memo, the podcast, where we have conversations across the state. You're familiar with the newsletter. You can sign up at oklahomamemo.com/subscribe. But today we're having a conversation with Kate Schechter from World Neighbors. Now, how are you doing, Kate?
I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me.
The weather's starting to get nicer in Oklahoma City. We may have 60s and 70s for the Super Bowl. But today, we are here to talk about your organization. It's called World Neighbors, and I have to admit, I think I had heard of it, but wasn't totally familiar, but was blown away by the fact that this is an Oklahoma entity that has a global reach focused on just helping people across the planet. It seems like the most noble thing. So let's just start off with the easiest question of the day. Tell us about World Neighbors and what its mission is.
World Neighbors is a 75-year-old organization that started in Oklahoma City. It's a international development organization that works with very remote, isolated rural communities around the world. Right now, we're in 14 countries in Africa, Asia, Latin America, and in Haiti. Yes, we still work in Haiti, even though we all know that it's a difficult place to work. The origins of World Neighbors are that Dr. Peters was teaching at OCU and he was asked to give a guest lecture at St. Luke's United Methodist Church. And he went off sermon and started talking about his experience during World War II, where he had been stationed in the Philippines and he had been exposed to poverty of the sort he'd never seen before. And he promised himself if he survived the war, he wanted to do something in his life to address this. And after the sermon, a lot of people came up to him and said, John, this is your calling. You should do something about it. And that's the origins of World Neighbors. So while we don't call ourselves a faith-based organization, I like to say that we're all very spiritual. The work is very fulfilling and spiritual in nature. We work with many different religions all around the world, and many different cultures, but there is a sort of a guiding light of believing that we all should help each other and help our neighbors. One of the things um, really makes World Neighbors in some ways unique, and it stems from our founder, who really was ahead of his time in many ways. He believed that we should not give away things, that giving away in kind goods or handing out cash or handing out anything might actually be detrimental to long term sustainable change. And so, everybody uses the cliche of hand up instead of a handout. Well, we really abide by that. And sometimes it's not so easy. I mean, we'll get an offer of, an amazing shipment of medication or something, and I have to direct that very generous offer to a different organization because World Neighbors really does abide by this belief that people can lift themselves out of poverty given an opportunity.
The story is very interesting, and not that it's all about me, but I gotta tell you, Kate, my grandfather was a Methodist minister and was at OCU right about the time that Dr. Peters was. I wonder if the Reverend Roy Welton knew Dr. Peters. My dad followed in my grandfather's footsteps about 10 years later, never went into the ministry. He was a jazz musician. He was just figuring out what he wanted to do, but that's their worlds may have crossed at that time. And it's just funny how things like this always come back to the central part of the United States. I always say there's always an Okie in the midst. Why is it important that World Neighbors, or why is it valuable that it's headquartered still in Oklahoma City?
Well, I see us as a gem that, as you pointed out earlier, a lot of people don't know about, but that has really enhanced the city in many ways by about teaching people, especially young people, about the importance of engaging in what's happening around the world, in understanding what's happening globally, and caring about our neighbors around the world. We have been getting support from families in Oklahoma City for 75 years. That's generation upon generation learning about what Dr. Peters started and caring about engaging beyond the borders of the United States and beyond the borders of Oklahoma. So I think really are a gem. We also exemplify the strengths of Oklahoma. The people that we're working with are survivors. They've gone through, forgive me, hell and high water to improve their lives and make things better, not just for themselves or their communities. It's also a community driven organization. We believe that people need to help each other, not just, Americans helping their foreign neighbors, but also within these communities. A lot of the methodologies that we use are dependent on people helping each other within the community. For example, one of the first things we do with a community is tell them that they've got to start figuring out how to save their own money so that they can invest in themselves and in their community. And in order to do that, we do something called savings and credits. A lot of these places where we work, there's no banks. The banks are in the main cities, and people need to figure out how they're going to get credit and be able to invest. So we help them to save money together and then loan to each other at very low interest rates. I honestly was a little skeptical about this mechanism when I first heard about it. I was coming from Washington, D.C. There was a lot of money in international development, a lot of talk about microfinancing, and I heard about this, and it sounded very small scale and kind of like, yeah, great, but like, how much money can people who don't have any money save? I have to admit to you, when I first heard about this mechanism of savings and credits, I was a little skeptical. I was coming from Washington, where there was a lot of money in international development, a lot of discussion about international financing, microfinancing, using banks to support very poor communities. And here I was being introduced to a whole new mechanism that cut out the banks altogether, so that there was no debt, and that the communities were going to save the money together and somehow, develop credit and capital. And I was shocked by how uh, impactful this mechanism can be. I was one of the first experiences I had where we went to Timor Leste, East Timor. So we go up into the mountains, and it's pure rocks. I think to myself, how are they surviving in this kind of an environment? And we get to this village, and there's a big crowd waiting, and they welcome us, and we sit down and we start talking about how World Neighbors has helped them. And they say, well, the savings and credit program has allowed us to save $36,000. And I'm thinking, wow, okay, how did that happen in 1 year in this place? Well, what happened was that we helped them to liaise with the local government. The government invested in a road. They now can bring their produce down to markets, and they are selling and making money at a rate that no one ever dreamed of. It's that kind of thing where it's really not that we spent a lot of money. It's getting the governments to chip in where they really should be chipping in. It's they benefited from their populations doing much better. And people feel a lot better about themselves when they're not hand to mouth, subsistence living. So it's been a real exciting and honor to be able to be a part of this.
Makes sense. We're in Oklahoma where the motto is labor conquers all. It's very much a hand up and not a handout mentality. And you were helping that community. So let me just back up. And you were talking about your communities and your partnerships and how you enter into them. How does an entity, a town, a village, a country, how do they engage with you at the very, very beginning? And is it all overseas, or are there partnerships here in the United States?
Well, Unfortunately, I'm going to start with your last question first, which is unfortunately, we do not have programs in the United States. Many people have asked me, why don't you? And I do think that there is potential to do a lot of the kinds of things that we're doing here in the States and to learn from this methodology. And actually, there are nonprofits in Oklahoma City who have adopted some of Dr. Peters's original ideas about helping people to help themselves. So, and as you say, it's woven into the fabric of Oklahoma. Uh, it's a state where people, do pull themselves up by their bootstraps. The way we start is that in many cases now, after 75 years, uh, people hear about what's happening in their neighboring village and they request that we come to them. We've now been in 40 countries around the world. We estimate that we have helped almost 30 million people. So the breadth and the depth of what we've done at this point is huge. It's very rare at this point that we'll go into a new community without any kind of connection to something that we've been doing in a neighboring community. We go in, and the first thing we do is we listen. We ask them to think about their own assets. They obviously have been surviving somehow, even though, international assistance hasn't come in and helped them. In many cases, their own governments don't have access even or know about what's going on in these very remote communities. So the first step is to assess their assets, their strengths. We don't do what used to be called needs-based assessments. We're doing it in reverse. Instead of saying, "Oh, you poor people, you don't have this and you don't have that," we're saying, "Let's assess what you do have and build on those strengths." And that also is a way of respecting the work that's come before us. And it's also helpful in that sometimes there's the first reaction to us is, well, where's the handouts? If you don't have anything to give us, then we don't really know whether it's worth working with you. So, you're saying to them, we're not going to hand out anything to you, but we are going to help you build on your assets. And everyone likes that because nobody wants to be dependent on anybody else.
Kate, I see here that just last year, World Neighbors graduated 49 communities. That's a lot of communities at once. And I imagine this takes a lot of time, a lot of listening. What does it mean exactly to graduate 49 communities? Is there a graduation ceremony? Does it always happen in May?
So, yeah, Jen, what does it mean to graduate? Well, we have a methodology that we've developed over these 75 years that entails um, understanding that rural communities are not going to change quickly. One of the challenges with international development has always been that the donor wants instant results. I'm going to give money, but you're going to show me impact. And of course, that is very difficult to do. And one of the beauties of Dr. Peters's original ideas is understanding that you need to start small and build up, and that you have to understand that change happens slowly. So our methodology requires an 8 to 10 year period in order for an organization, a community to feel that they're really ready to be on their own. Now, 8 to 10 years is a long time in an industry that wants instant results. Um, so it's challenging. I mean, we get funding sometimes for a couple of years, but it's rare that anybody's going to really stick with you for a decade. Um, and when we feel and they feel that they are now ready to be on their own, we we agree with them that they're graduating. Now, sometimes communities move much faster than 8 to 10 years. I was in a community in Haiti where they were learning quickly. They started to understand that they had access to resources that they didn't know about before. And within 6 years, they came to our team and said, we're ready to be on our own and we're actually ready to start training others. One of the other things that we do is we're not just neighbor to neighbor helping communities, we're asking them to do the same in return. So after they get to a point where they're stable and feel ready to quote unquote graduate, then they go off and start to be consultants teaching. They start demonstration farms. We have a whole kind of virtual school in Nepal now where farmers come to learn about innovations in agriculture. And we are trying to expand and scale up, not necessarily under the umbrella of World Neighbors. I always say to people, Dr. Peters would have loved it that you're trying to copy us. The more people who copy us, the better.
So we've talked a lot about making communities more aware of the resources they have and to build upon assets as opposed to just doing it the other way around. But are there other ways in which World Neighbors is helping liaise with the government or produce things for them that aren't just about them taking advantage of their own assets?
Yes. So what you just said, one of the most important things. World Neighbors is a relatively small organization. We have a budget of 3.5 million. We, as I told you, we'll stay in these places for 8 to 10 years, so we're not spending huge amounts of money every year, but we're in it for the long term. And we believe that the best way to help these people to really reach a higher standard of living is for the governments of these various countries to step in where we are not able to really ratchet up and scale up at the level that might be possible with government assistance. Many times the government just doesn't even know about these communities. Or we are helping them to liaise in ways that, like I described about, creating a road that all of a sudden opens up markets. A really good example of that is for many, many years, the US government was giving money and medication to central governments, especially in Africa, to manage the HIV/AIDS epidemic. Well, we had communities in very remote places where people were, getting HIV/AIDS and did not have access to the medication. Just a simple liaising between the government and these villages, getting the medication to the people, teaching people about prevention has changed whole communities from people who were unable to really work to thriving places where people are now dealing with HIV as a chronic disease as opposed to a fatal disease.
Hey, you've been with World Neighbors now for more than a decade, I believe, if that's correct. And you must have some favorite stories of impact, some stories where you come away. Maybe you don't instantly recognize it as impact, but down the road, and it's become one of your favorite stories to tell. Do you have two or three of those examples of impact?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely right. There are certain moments that you never forget, and that probably will stick with me for the rest of my life. One of my favorite stories is when I first started, I was invited to Nepal, and I'd never been to Nepal before. And we went to meet with a group that was a savings and credit group, all women. They were all dressed in these beautiful saris. Each one got up and told their story. One woman got up and said, "I'm an untouchable. My children are untouchables. And before World Neighbors, no one would come near me and my children.
Could you explain
Through World Neighbors,
could you explain what untouchables are? I think it a caste system.
it's a caste system. They don't use the word untouchable anymore. They use the word elite. I think it's to kind of soften the reality of the problem. And I didn't even know there was a caste system in Nepal. I learned that on that first trip. I knew there was a caste system in India. Of course, it's illegal, but unfortunately, some things die hard. And this is a problem that has plagued both of these countries for many, many decades, centuries probably. So the problem is that when you're born into a certain caste, it's very hard to shake that. There are many ways in which people sort of figure out what caste you're in, and then it can be very difficult to overcome those prejudices. And so we work very hard to encourage these communities to work with each other and to over religious differences, caste differences, gender differences, all kinds of differences. We have been incredibly successful in this effort. When people start to realize that if they cooperate with each other, they'll all benefit, you start to see some of those barriers break down. Anyway, so she says, she tells this incredible story of how she went from really being, homeless to having a thriving farm now, and her children are at university in Kathmandu, the capital, and it's all because World Neighbors has helped this community to start to work together with each other and not have these barriers. So I went up to her afterwards and, being kind of American and not thinking, I touched her. I touched her arm and I said, "Thank you so much for sharing your story. That was so powerful." Well, she kind of looked at my hand like, "Do you understand what you're doing? You're touching me." And then, of course, she started hugging me. And then we needed to take a dozen photos of us hugging each other. And it was such an eye opening experience for me that I just don't think about those bubbles and those barriers. But for some people, they live with them every day.
You think about that. I mean, each individual has their own life and their own joy and their own suffering, and the change that you made in her life, that World Neighbors made in that community. I mean, to us, we may say, "Oh, that was just over there," but to them, it was literally life changing. And as we segue toward the end of the podcast, I wanted to get to the most important thing, or the most entertaining thing, perhaps, and that is there's a 75th anniversary symposium coming up. That seems to me like it's going to have lecturers and guests telling and talking about World Neighbors. What's that event about? Where will it be, and when will it be?
Thank you so much for mentioning that. So we are our actual anniversary. It's also Earth Day and many other days, of which is April 22nd. But on March 27th, Friday, March 27th, from 9 to 12 at Oklahoma City University, which is is where Dr. Peters was doing his teaching. We are planning a symposium that's open to the public and that will allow us all to discuss some of the issues that you and I have been talking about, and to look forward to what do we see happening in the future, given some of the changes that have happened in international development work. Um, the website will have a landing page to register, and that should be this week. We're going to bring up that landing page. It's at wn.org, and we encourage people in Oklahoma City to please um, look into it, and if you have the time, to come and join us in that discussion.
Does it cost anybody anything, or is it free?
It's free. It's free. It's free. We are going to try to get some of the major universities to work together to have people representing various universities in the Oklahoma City area, so that we can have a good, diverse bunch of different voices talking about some of the challenging areas that we all work in.
I failed to ask you this question, but I think it's important for the listener and the viewer to understand. How is World Neighbors funded? I mean, it's clear at it's clear at wn.org that World Neighbors is a nonpartisan organization. Nobody has to fear that it's left or it's right. It's nonpartisan. But how are there just benefactors out there who fund that $3.5 million budget that allow you to do what you do? I mean, I presume you would like more, perhaps.
Thank you for asking. Um, all the funding comes from private sources, foundations, individuals, family foundations. Up until 2012, the board directed the staff not to apply for U.S. government funds. For about a decade, we did get U.S. government funds, but as you know, that that has ended now, and we had really isolated where we were using USAID funds. It was only in one region. So World Neighbors has been able to weather that storm pretty well. Um, we do have an endowment, so that's also helped us and helped us to, kind of ensure stability for the organization going forward. I've really pushed this idea of diversity of funding. So we really are always looking for various different streams. But the main source of our funding has been supporters, individual families, and individuals over all these years. And we're deeply grateful for that.
I think if folks go to WN.org and read the story of Dr. Peters, it's going to catch a lot of attention. It's a story that needs to be told every morning. I could even see Kate a movie at some point.
I could too. I think he's really a charismatic personality, and he's written several books, which are very powerful. Whenever I kind of am struggling and I need some inspiration, I know that if I sit down and read one of Dr. Peters's books, it's going to help me to navigate any kind of difficult choices and decisions that I've got to make.
Well, Kate, we have covered a little bit of everything: the origin of world neighbors, the impact in countries across the world, where you get your money, the fact that it's nonpartisan. We even talked about the 75-year anniversary symposium that's coming up on March the 27th, I believe. You can find out more information at WN.org. But is there anything that I failed to ask about or that you wanted to talk about further?
Well, I just want to encourage people to continue to think about their neighbors, to check out World Neighbors and how we are making sure that we continue to be global citizens. I know that there's a lot of interest in travel and in understanding what's happening around the world. And I love to see that, especially when I go to speak at universities. I know that there's a lot of interest in what is happening around the world. Please look at our website, write to us. We're eager to share our stories, more of our stories with you, and to find out ways in which we can partner or have people volunteer to work with us. So get to know us better, and we would love to engage in continued discussion about the importance of working with our neighbors.
Pete Schechter from World Neighbors. It's an Oklahoma City organization that has global reach and definitely global impact. We heard about some of that today. Folks, if you're watching this on the Oklahoma Memo YouTube channel, leave a comment below or a question, and I'll make sure that it gets to Kate. If you're listening to us on podcast, of course, the best way for your neighbors and friends to get this podcast is to leave a 5-star review. That's how the algorithm works. I didn't make the rules. But for Kate, I'm Ryan from Oklahoma Memo, and we will talk to you later.
Thank you.